Well, it's a pleasure to be joined here on MASN All Access by Aram Leighton, co-founder of Just Baseball. Aram, thank you for finding the time here. I know you were grinding a lot of tape at the beginning of baseball season, so we appreciate you fitting us in.
Always have time for you and always have time for this Orioles farm system, man. I mean, I could talk about them all day.
Yeah, well, Aram, you just came out with your new top 100 for Just Baseball. Wanted to talk about the Orioles on that list. Unsurprisingly, there are a lot of members of the Baltimore organization on your top 100. You've got Jackson Holliday at number 1. Samuel Basallo checks in at number 12. Not really a ton we can talk about with those two guys that we haven't talked about already. So I want to bump down just one spot to number 13, where you've got Coby Mayo, which is a lot higher than we have seen Mayo on some other lists. We know he's starting to creep up those top 100 boards, but you've got him at number 13 already. What was the reason you have him so high?
I think he's just a perfect example of a player really figuring things out between Double-A and then getting that second taste of Double-A, and then we saw it going into Triple-A, where bigger guys take a bit more time. And I think we're starting to see that, like, Austin Riley comp be thrown out a bit with him. And I usually don't love comps, but with somebody like him, it's uncanny. And you remember with Austin Riley, it took some time, and then all of a sudden he starts to come into his own, and he turns into the superstar that he is. 6'5", longer levers. That's going to result in power, but it's also going to result in, I think, a little bit more challenge to consistently repeat your moves, time things up, and all that good stuff. And Mayo was always younger for each level, held his own, or even better than that. Then finally had just a little bit of that struggle in 22 in Double-A. And I think just being able to build on that and the next year make some swing adjustments that really helped him consistently make contact. We see him elevate, hit the crap out of the ball pretty consistently. The defense has gotten better at third base, rocket for an arm. So all of the things that I think were concerns, quote unquote, around him have been shored up, and all of the strengths have just continued to be accentuated. And for me, I mean, you're looking at a guy that could be a scary blend of power and now improved hit, the ability to stick at third. He draws plenty of walks. It's getting harder and harder to poke a hole in Mayo's game, and the power is just undeniable.
Yeah, and you mentioned the improved defense at third base. A lot of the question marks with Mayo coming out of high school, or as you mentioned, it's a bigger guy. Is he going to have to play first base or potentially a corner outfield? I assume part of your evaluation, putting him in your top 15, is, yeah, this guy can be a solid big league defensive third baseman?
Yeah, absolutely. And the arm was always a nice thing to fall back on, but then the footwork getting so much better, the actions being smoother. And I know he worked really hard on that. But you're seeing him now be able to make those plays backhand and make the throws. He's always been able to do that, but now crashing in, going to his left, having more range. I feel really good about his potential to stick there at third. And even if he's just an average defender, the bat, I think, can be even better than the average third baseman by such a large margin that you can kind of offset even if the defense is a bit fringier. When you look at exit velocities as well, you take the top 10% of his EVs from last year, the 90th percentile exit velocity, 107.5 miles an hour for a kid that was 21 years old and improving his bat to ball. I think he's going to continue to hit the ball harder. We saw a home run already early this season. It was a backup cutter that not only does he get to inside, he keeps it fair at 111 miles an hour. I think the feel for the barrel with Mayo is really underrated because the swing can look a little unorthodox, but this guy's figured it out. And I think people are going to become I think it's become a lot harder to deny what he's able to do in the box.
Yeah, he's had an excellent start to the season thus far in AAA Norfolk. We could be seeing him up in the big leagues here pretty soon. Want to talk about a guy that we are seeing in the big leagues right now, your number 39 ranked prospect in Colton Cowser. He made a ton of strides this spring. Can you talk about what you've seen from him and his improvements thus far?
Yeah, just some subtle setup adjustments, I think, that have him a little bit more consistent and on time. He had a little bit more movement pre-swing, and I think it kind of disrupted the timing. He was a guy that when he was drafted, it was kind of hit overpowered to a degree, but you could project the power because he's 6'3". And then this past year, it seemed like it was kind of power over hit. We saw pretty extreme EVs that I think people weren't expecting, but a lot more inconsistency within the zone, and I think that was kind of surprising. Then this spring training, you see some tangible adjustments mechanically. I think now much more consistently on time, and that's allowed him to tap into that power, but also get back to that guy that can make pretty consistent contact. I still think that It's changed a little bit, maybe from what the perception was in terms of, it's maybe not going to be a plus hit tool, but at the same time, I think the power is a lot more pronounced than maybe people would have thought as well. So seeing him kind of strike that balance again more so, where you're seeing the hit tool get back to where it was or closer to it, and then the power still being there, I'm really excited about that. And anytime you have the tangible adjustment to go with that, that's great. The swing decisions and the comfort in the box just looked so much better in spring training, even though it's a smaller sample. And just seeing him be able to be on time and produce, I think, some of the best swings we've seen from him since the lower levels is really exciting. I think it's easy to buy into what we're seeing from Cowser with those adjustments.
Yeah, a lot of Orioles fans have been buying into what they've been seeing from Cowser in spring training and thus far early in the season. Nice luxury to have him as your number 4 outfielder. I want to talk about another outfielder who snuck into your top 100. That's Enrique Bradfield Jr. at number 99. He hasn't been in every top 100 across the board when you're looking at places like MLB Pipeline and Baseball America. Aram, what got him into your top 100 here?
A few things. So the first and foremost, it's the probability of him being an everyday big leaguer. I mean, the bat, of course, needs to come along a bit more, but when you look at what he can do in center field, he's already a plus defender out there. He could be as close to an 80 glove as you're going to get. I think really it's Pete Crow Armstrong in the Cubs organization, and then it's Enrique Bradfield Jr. out there in center field. When you look at guys with how much ground they can cover, how comfortable they are, and I think you could put him up there in center field right now in the big leagues, and he'd be one of the better options. The bat's the question, and is there going to be much power? Probably not. But the fact that he can draw walks as well as he does, and the bat to ball skills are there. There's enough physical projection, I think, in his frame to where he can grow into that gap to gap power. And just seeing him, we saw it spring breakout, and just being able to get live looks, even going back to the Cape. He is such an explosive athlete. He's so quick. And the Orioles are so good at getting the most out of their hitters. And we're seeing it case by case here when you look at Kobe Mayo, some mechanical adjustments, and then getting to where he is, and him even being able to talk about those things and crediting the Orioles. And then we just talk about Cowser, right? And some subtle adjustments that are helping him maximize what he's doing at the plate. Bradfield has all of the natural ability. He's going to continue to get a little bit stronger. And then on top of that, the floor is so high with the defense. You can be one of the best stolen base guys, one of the best base stealers in Major League Baseball when it's all said and done, too. I wouldn't be surprised if he steals 80, 90, maybe even 100 bags this year in a full minor league season. You assume the bat's going to come along, especially because of the talent, but now in the situation he's in, that even makes it even better. I feel really good about his chances of being at least an everyday big league center fielder.
Yeah, and Aram, when you're crafting this top 100, of course you're evaluating the player themselves. But when you are looking at a prospect, a recently drafted one, for example, with Enrique Bradfield Jr., who is now in the Orioles player development system, how far does that go in your evaluation of a prospect like Bradfield?
Generally, I like to just look at the players in a vacuum because I think sometimes we can get a little ahead of ourselves with the Rays picked up this reliever, so now he's going to turn into somebody that's gross. Or, and I think we can have a similar thing happen with prospects, but you also have to look at certain situations and say, okay, this is the perfect landing spot for him. And with Bradfield, out of the draft, my concern was some swing mechanic things above all. Again, the plate discipline's great, and you can't teach the speed and the defense. So just knowing that he's going to an organization that has continued to have a track record over the last few years of maximizing talented hitters just to optimize their moves and get the most out of what they're doing with their swing and their path, of course, that's going to be an example where I think it really ends up bolstering him. But I would say it's only a few guys in the top 100 where that ends up being a factor. And Bradfield was probably the biggest one when you consider the Orioles and where he's at right now as a player and where he can be.